Hello and welcome to Bud's RPG Review, where I give my thoughts on role-playing games, card games and board games. Today's retro review is the 1989 adventure Lichemaster for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplaying 1st edition by Games Workshop. Okay, to the cover. On the front we have a fantastic piece of art by the legendary Gary Chalk, which is more than reminiscent of his superb Lone Wolf art. Interestingly, throughout the book it actually refers to itself as Return of the Lichemaster, which is a campaign that Games Workshop designed for their miniatures line, and what this adventure is based upon. I'm not sure why this wasn't clarified on the cover. An oversight perhaps? The adventure is touted as being for around 5 beginning characters, which is defined as no more than 800 XP. We are given a bit of background to the events of the adventure. It all begins in the year 2132 with an outlaw gang called the Blue Blood Bandits, led by one Adolphus Svemmer. The Blue Bloods were known and feared throughout the Empire, and as their name implies, many of the gang were born from noble families. Unbeknownst to the gang, their leader was secretly a champion of chaos, worshipping the Lord of Decay himself, Nurgle. Ultimately, the Blue Bloods were defeated by a large force of militia, witch hunters and dwarven mountain scouts, and Svemmer's followers took him mortally wounded into the Grey Mountains and buried him in a mound, where it sat undiscovered for centuries. That is until Heinrich Kemmler, the Lichemaster, stumbled upon it. Kemmler is a necromancer who grew in power for many years before finally being defeated at the remote monastery of La Maison Tal by their master there, René de Muscadet. Muscadet struck Kemmler with a rare and powerful magical item, the Staff of Ether Shrivening, which stripped Kemmler of his powers and left him wandering around the mountains in disarray for the last 40 years. 2 weeks ago, Kemmler stumbled upon the burial mound of the Blue Bloods, where the demon that was bound to Svemmer and buried with him struck a deal to restore his lost power. The Muscadet, now near death, had a dream vision. He'd seen Kemmler on the verge of regaining his power and more. He saw the burial mound in the mountains in his vision and heard the name Svemmer. When he woke up, he told his nominated successor, Jean-Louis Dintrans, and told him of his vision, and then died 2 days later. Dintrans is taking this vision very seriously. He knows that the burial mound is in the mountains and wants to track it down, so has decided to research this by having the cover story of writing a book, The Definitive History of the Blue Bloods, and hiring adventurers to search the area for the last resting place of Adolphus Svemmer. The adventure begins with the players answering a note that Dintrans has posted everywhere nearby, offering good money to adventurers willing to explore the map and local area. If the players decide to pursue the adventure hook, they end up on the road to La Maison Tal. On the road, the adventurers have an encounter with a group of Skaven, led by a Grey Seer, who interestingly don't want to fight and flee the scene. This encounter becomes pertinent later on. After a few more encounters, the players eventually arrive at La Maison Tal, a walled compound dedicated to Tal, the god of nature and wild places. Upon arrival, they meet the master of the monastery, Jean-Louis Dintrans, who explains what he wants the adventurers to do. Dintrans gives the players the area of Frugelhofen to explore, and the players set off the next day. On the way to Frugelhofen, the adventurers encounter some dwarven miners who are on their way to Gimbrin's mine, just outside of Frugelhofen, and if befriended, they will advise that the players should speak to the dwarven lawmaster Gimbrin. The next day the players arrive in Frugelhofen, which is described and statted out in excellent detail, where the players can start their investigations into the local burial mounds. The adventurers quickly get roped into a local festival called Stoning Day, but this does give the players a great chance to speak to the locals and familiarise themselves with current gossip. At the end of the second day there, a local shepherd is discovered murdered, with human finger bones near the body. The PCs are advised to let the local dwarven miners know that something foul is afoot. The next chapter, entitled The Lichemaster Strikes, covers the players' arrival at the mine. Upon arrival, the players are initially treated with suspicion, but if they are honest, and if they sweeten their deal with some local brandy, the Lawmaster gives the players some good information on the Blue Bloods. At this point, the Lichemaster unleashes an attack on the mine, and there's a running battle as the dwarves and the players fight off the skeletons to head to Frugelhofen for safety. On the way back, smoke plumes are noticed in the distance at the Wernick's farm. The adventurers are encouraged to go and check on them, and upon arrival face another onslaught by the undead hordes. In the following chapter, Carnage of Frugelhofen, all parties are gathered to discuss their options. During the night, the Lichemaster attacks the village with an undead catapult, which the villagers and party have to take cover from. What then follows is the Battle of Frugelhofen. The undead horde sweeps down upon the village, and it appears that the only recourse the villagers, dwarves and adventurers have is to board conicals and flee to La Maison Tal, along the rapid Vasswater River. Upon arrival at La Maison Tal, the monks go about healing the party and getting up to speed on events. The next chapter is entitled Secrets in the Crypt. Players realise that the next stop after Frugelhofen is La Maison Tal, and have to try and persuade the various parties to stay and fight in the upcoming battle. The master of La Maison Tal, Jean-Louis Dintrans, calls a meeting with the players and lays his cards on the table on recent events and discloses his true information on why he hid them. He asks the players to explore the crypt below La Maison Tal to find the old master's hidden laboratory, where he believes that he was hiding a powerful weapon that could help swing the battle in their favour. Of course, time is of the essence here, and the players then go into the crypts, where after a few traps and a few red herrings, they find the old master's hidden laboratory, along with two very powerful magical items, the Iron Man and the Arca Chaotis, a powerful Skaven magical item, along with the old master's diary. The old master believed that the Iron Man could be activated by the contents of the Arca Chaotis, but this cannot be opened by anybody other than a Skaven with a warp key. When the adventurers arrive back at the surface, they find La Maison Tal surrounded by Kemler's undead, and the realisation hits them that they need to find some Skaven and strike a deal with them to open the Arca Chaotis. Players work out after reading the diary that the Skaven that they encountered earlier must have been about as they were looking for the Arca Chaotis. They have the option to either fight their way out of the monastery or head out via the sewers to try and find the Skaven that they came across early on in the adventure. The adventurers eventually find the group and have to strike a deal with them to get the Skaven to activate the Iron Man in exchange for their help fighting the undead, the reward for the Skaven being that the Arca Chaotis is theirs at the end of the battle. The Skaven then accompany the heroes back to the monastery, where they activate the Arca and animate the Iron Man, who helps turn the battle in the players' favour. There's then a final showdown with the Lichemaster himself. In conclusion, I have mixed feelings about this adventure. On the positive side, the adventure is very Warhammer. That is to say, it's well fleshed out and has that Warhammer feel that other role-playing systems just don't have. There's an interesting cowardice heroism system in place throughout the adventure, which unlocks allegiances and magical items depending on how the players act throughout. Frugelhofen and its inhabitants are excellently brought to life, as well as the pre-generated characters and the NPCs. Also of note throughout is the artwork, which includes industry alumni such as Gary Chalk and John Blanche. It's worth noting that with a bit of effort this would be fairly easy to convert to Warhammer Fantasy Roleplaying 2nd edition. On the negative side, however, is the fact that this was originally a Warhammer Fantasy battle campaign, and it really shows throughout. There are large portions of proceedings that are turned into pitched tabletop battles, and I feel that a lot of the desperation that permeates throughout the campaign is neutered somewhat by this. Additionally, the premise of turning to Skaven for help seems highly unlikely to be a course that any Warhammer player would even give consideration to. Also, one thing that annoyed me is that we were told early on about this incredible magical item, the Staff of Edershrivening, but this is never mentioned again. All in all, this is an okay adventure that starts really well, but by the end sadly seems to collapse in on itself. I would give this a 6 out of 10. There aren't many 1st edition Warhammer adventures around, but fortunately there are better ones than this. If you enjoyed this review, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and also don't forget to check out my other reviews. Bud out.